Season 5, Episode 11 of Practice Bubbles and Steelers. I am Tim Fetterman. That is Jonathan Litzkin. Jason Conander is joining us because today we are previewing the Texas Longhorns, one of the two new members of the SEC. That's going to take some getting used to, but a whole bunch of change in the Longhorn program this offseason. A lot of guys gone, a lot of guys in, a lot of new stuff to discuss. Rodney Terry still the head coach, for better or for worse. And how can the Longhorns... Well, I didn't really have any plan to keep going on that sentence, but Texas moves into the SEC. How do you think that changes the way that the program operates, thinks, and stands? Jason?
Well, hopefully it makes. First off, it's great to be on with you guys. I remember the last time we talked, Texas lost to Houston in overtime at the Moody Center, and I had a great time talking to you too. And I was like, damn, I really hope that they'll have me on again. And so lo and behold, here we are on August 12th talking a little Texas hoops, a few months out from the season, but never too early to talk basketball. How does Texas think differently in the SEC? Well, hopefully it means that the program will be better funded. Not that there was any lack of funding before, but there's sort of this thing at Texas where football is like the main sport by a lot, and then there's a big drop-off. And I think that we saw with the baseball program when they hired Jim Schlossnagle away from Texas A&M, that was sort of a paradigm shift in the way that the school operates in terms of the alumni kind of funding the other sports, making big hires. And to me, what happened with the baseball program signalized that the clock is ticking for Rodney Terry. Things need to happen this year. The program obviously needs to make the second weekend. Final Four is never a realistic expectation for the Texas basketball program, in my opinion. But if they can get back to the Elite Eight or at least have a Sweet 16 caliber team throughout the season, I think Rodney Terry's job will be safe for another year. I think that they're going to continue to attack the high school ranks more. Rodney Terry originally had a 4-man recruiting class before Cam Scott decommitted. Once the portal opened, he's at South Carolina now. So I think that Texas would like to continue to build these 3-4-man high school classes. That's something they didn't do as much of in the Big 12, especially in the post-Shaka Smart era. And then lastly, I think that they're going to continue to schedule these absolutely abhorrent non-conference home games against Delaware State, Chicago State, and some of the worst teams in the country, because they think that by playing a high-quality SEC conference schedule, they'll just magically be fine, and therefore they can play 7 of the 12 worst teams in the country in non-conference. I can't wrap my head around it. I understand why they're doing it. But
I just want to add real quick, because we brought it up. Rodney Terry does know that the SEC is the only power conference right now that's playing 18 games and not 20, right?
No, he doesn't. I don't think he knows that. I mean, it's a top-heavy non-conference schedule again. And, I mean, the similarity between this year's non-conference and last year's non-conference is like they have literally 2 games that are big games. Last year they played UConn and Marquette, and then this year they're going to play UConn and Ohio State. And then NC State, they made the Final Four last year. Obviously, most of the pieces from that team are gone, but it's still a solid road game. I mean, the third best non-conference game that they have by a long shot, next to the UConn and Ohio State games. So the one thing I do like about the non-conference schedule is that they open up against a good team, Ohio State. Like when I was at Texas, they would always open up against Sam Houston or Houston Christian or something. And so it's nice to see them play a real team.
Houston was good last year.
They were good last year, but they were not good my sophomore year when they came in and played a Chris Beard coach team and lost by 1 million.
Yes. Anyway, I also do want to mention Texas is in the Legends Classic in Brooklyn with Syracuse, Texas Tech, and St. Joe's. Not the worst MTE. Syracuse is fine. Texas Tech should be a top 25 team. St. Joe's is one of the most talented mid-major teams in the country. So that should be a solid MTE. It's obviously not Maui. It's not the Players era, whatever that is. It's nothing special, but it is an additional, at least one high major game that will be at the very worst. At the very worst, you get one quad 2 and one quad 3. There's a chance you get 2 quad 1s out of that. But regardless, back to the point. Texas, you said that the Final Four shouldn't be a realistic expectation for Texas basketball. Now, this year's team, yes, I would agree with that. But why can't the Final Four be something that Texas basketball strives for as a goal long term? Maybe not make the Final Four every single year, but why can't Texas basketball get on a level of where they're consistently fielding top 12, top 15 teams?
Well, part of it is not running your own region in recruiting. I mean, they have for a very long time been lapped in recruiting Dallas area kids. There's a very long list of players who they did try and get aboard and just had no luck. Jacoby Walter and Anthony Black and Jordan Walsh, just to name a few. And so, first off, they have to recruit the Dallas area, the Houston area a lot better. Having Trey Johnson is a good start. He's a Dallas area kid, even though he finished his high school days at Link Academy. That's a good start, but they need to recruit a lot better. And secondly, as much as I enjoy Rodney Terry, I love his positive energy, I think that they really need a coach. And while I think that some of the on the court stuff with Chris Beard was questionable, and even some of the stuff in the locker room that I had heard was a little bit questionable, the one thing that was undeniable with Chris Beard was that he was able to galvanize the student body to be excited about men's basketball, which is really hard at Texas, and that's something that people don't really understand unless you spent a lot of time in Austin, unless you went to UT. It was something that I didn't understand when I first started covering the sports there. And some of the people on the beat would tell me that this is always going to be a football town, no matter what, and no matter how good the other programs are. So they need a coach. They need coaches, a culture where it's like, we know this football program exists on campus. We're going to work with it, but we've also got something pretty cool going on over here. It's about exciting the school community, exciting the donors, the boosters, the alumni. And so I think that looking at what Alabama's doing, recruiting at a very high level, both in the high school ranks and in the portal, bringing in, new high level assistant coaches every time, coaches from the staff either leave or get hired away. I think that model that Alabama is working on as a football first school with a just as good basketball program these last few years is something that Texas should take after. So I don't want to say that Rodney Terry's holding back the program because, they made an Elite Eight with him under incredibly difficult circumstances. But I do think that the ceiling.
Hey, he recruited half of the starting lineup.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, as he has said before, he did recruit half of that starting lineup. But I do think that the thing with Rodney,
he did.
Right. Yeah. I do think that the thing with Rodney Terry is that I think that he might give Texas a lower ceiling, both in recruiting and in their on the court output. Just because, they had a good class with Trey Johnson and Nick Cody and Cam Scott, and they couldn't seal the deal. Cam Scott left and Nick Cody was unhealthy this past season. Obviously that's out of their control, but just little things like that kind of hold back the program from having a higher ceiling.
All right.
Texas brought in a couple of transfers this offseason, actually more than a couple of transfers, and a lot of them are expected to play some important roles. Let's start at the point guard spot where Jordan Pope and Julian Larry both come in. Jordan Pope from Oregon State, Julian Larry from Indiana State. Do you expect to see those two playing together at all? How do you expect the minutes to be split up? And what do you think we should expect from those guys? And Jonathan, speak a little bit more about Julian Larry.
Jonathan, you go first because I'm excited about this group, but I want to hear what you have to say about Julian Larry because you're a Missouri Valley guy.
So Julian Larry has I was high on him 2 years ago when Indiana State was the 4 or 5 seed in the Missouri Valley tournament. I forget which. But he's a guy that's an incredible passer, can knock down open shots, and is really, really good in transition. He needs for him to be at his best, he needs spacing. And that was what Indiana State did extremely well. So I think getting him on the floor with a fast offense, an offense that is surrounded by guys who can hit shots, which still be determined if Texas has that. But yeah, if you're playing fast, that's when he's going to be at his best. He's going to be able to get downhill and find the open guy off a driving kick. He's a good player. I'm just not sure that he's going to start over Jordan Pope here.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to start over Jordan Pope either, especially, or at least not to start out the season. But what you said about Julian Larry, with him playing at his best when he's playing at a fast pace with spacing, that's when Texas plays at their best in the current system that they run. And we saw that with the 23 team. Rodney Terry and Texas, when they're able to get out on the court and run and transition, have a fast-paced offense, that's when they're really firing on all cylinders. So I think that Julian Larry, he's an efficient shooter. He's a good enough defender. He's a great passer. I think that Texas, he's going to force the issue on this team, and it might become a little bit of a Serge Rice situation from 2 years ago where, Julian Larry might be playing with another point guard, maybe two other point guard type players if Kendall Weaver's on the floor for his defense. But Julian Larry is a player who I think is going to play a lot regardless of who else is on the floor, just because of the things that he brings to the court and the fact that he's one of those veteran guys being a fifth-year senior. As for Jordan Pope, I'm excited about that addition. He shoots the ball incredibly well. He didn't play on good Oregon State teams. That's kind of the thing that worries me. And that's why I think that this Texas team, it's not a hot take, that they have a low floor, because they do have a good amount of players who don't come from winning programs, didn't play winning basketball last season or even for the past 2 seasons in the case of Jordan Pope. And so I'm interested to see how that translates. I think that he'll take a little bit of a hit in terms of his per game averages and his usage rating. But what he brings to the table with high level shooting, athleticism, and good enough size in the SEC, I think that he'll be able to play a lot, and he's going to be their day one starter at the point guard spot.
Texas is not shy about playing 2 point guards. They did it last year with Tyrese Hunter and Max Abmas. I know, Jonathan, you don't think Tyrese Hunter's a point guard. I think he's a point guard. He was a point guard at Iowa State. He was only not a point guard at Texas because of Max Abmas. I don't think Texas is going to have a problem with playing 2 point guards at the same time. The problem is that last year when they did that, they were 10th in the Big 12 in defense. They were dead last in 3-point percentage defense in the Big 12. And they don't have Brock Cunningham anymore, who was one of their top defenders, which is also a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Brock Cunningham was a good defender. He was not very good at a lot. He was an interesting piece. And I don't know how much you can play. I don't know how much they're going to play Kendall Weaver, because Larry and Pope, Pope particularly is a good scorer, but neither of those guys have the scoring pop that you would get from Abmas. And I think they might need to put Trey Johnson on the floor, regardless of what I think of him, which is not very highly. They might need to put him on the floor more than they should, because they need his quote unquote shot creation.
Texas is very high on Trey Johnson. They think that in the best of cases scenarios, they think that they have another KD level prospect on campus. And so obviously, yes, they do. They're that high on Trey Johnson.
Devin Adams could be one of the best players to ever put on this uniform type beat here.
Yeah, no, not my words, but they really do think that they have a Kevin Durant caliber player on campus if he plays his best basketball this year.
Who said
they're that high on him? They are ridiculously high on Trey Johnson. And so, the jury's out. We'll see once he puts on the uniform and actually plays. As for what he brings to the table, he's a great shooter and he's a big guard. Defensively, I'm worried about this team because they didn't get any better defensively. They got bigger, which is a good thing. But, I wouldn't call Arthur Kaluma a good defender. I wouldn't call Tremont Mark a good defender. Jordan Pope's not a good defender. Trey Johnson is a freshman. And so, they got bigger, so they're going to be able to size up teams. But are they going to be better defensively? Yet to be seen. The thing with Kendall Weaver, he's going to play too. They're going to have a little bit of a logjam at the guard position because the reports out of practice this summer is that Kendall Weaver has improved the most out of any Texas player. Now, you got to take this with 2 grains of salt because, one, they have 3 returning players. And two, I worry about this being a little more of an indictment on Caden Shedrick, who needs to have a big year this year because they're thin at the 5. But Kendall Weaver, he works hard. He's athletic. He does the little things. He defends really, really hard. He's going to play.
I like Kendall Weaver. I like Kendall Weaver. He again, 121 offensive rating last year. Yeah, usage rate was very low, but on the offensive side of the ball, he is what he is. He can be a solid like 5th guy on offense. The jump shot obviously is not there. You would like to see him get back to the way he was shooting at UT Arlington, or just maybe be a little bit more of a threat, because I think the more you can have him be a threat from the outside, the better your spacing can be, the better Julian Larry and Jordan Pope will play, and the less that you have to rely on Trey Johnson and then Caden Shedrick in the low post, and then Arthur Kaluma and Tremont Mark, who we'll get into in a moment. But again, I don't know exactly how the minutes will be split up between Pope, Larry, Johnson, Weaver in this backcourt, and I'm not sure what the best combination of those two guys is at this moment. And I don't know if Texas is going to know. And this is something that I said was a problem for Texas a couple years ago when they brought in all of those transfers. And I really liked what they had. This was either the first year of Beard, or I think it was the first year of Beard. They brought in all those transfers and they just couldn't find their best lineup all year. I don't think it's going to be a problem that big. I think they will find their best lineup. But I wonder what that best lineup is.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably the biggest question with this program going into the season. I mean, the good thing is they actually have depth. The last 2 years with Rodney Terry, year and a half with Rodney Terry, I don't think that their depth was anywhere near where it should have been, especially in the Big 12. Last season the depth was probably the biggest issue, in my opinion. They barely had anyone who they could play at the 5, especially when Dylan Dessou got hurt. And so I don't know. I don't know what that best lineup's going to be. I think that at the core, it's going to be veterans playing. Julian Larry brings a lot of stability to an offense too. And so I think that that's something that Texas will need in close games. Hopefully none of those close games against like Delaware State or New Mexico State, but close games in SEC play. And I think Tremont Mark
after Jason Hooten on this show.
Like the New Mexico State game would have been way cooler 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. It would have been way cooler.
I'm just saying, you have been coming after Jason Hooten. He was the Sam Houston coach a couple of years ago. Now he's the New Mexico State coach.
Hey, no hate towards my fellow Jasons. But as I was saying, Tremont Mark's going to play a lot too. He's probably their best offensive threat on the team. He needs to play some defense this year, though. Being a 5th-year senior, when he was at Houston, I recall him being not a bad defender. Like he wouldn't have played if he couldn't defend at all. I think it's as simple as that. And so I think that he needs.
LJ Cryer theory.
Yeah, well, he's bigger than LJ Cryer.
No. What I'm saying is, last year Jonathan's qualm with Cryer was he just doesn't defend, and then all of a sudden he goes to Houston and he defends.
And not just at an average level, a very good level.
Yeah, like that's kind of the thing with Tremont Mark. Like he wasn't a good defender last year at Arkansas, and he wasn't an efficient player. Like those are things that are going to need to change, and that kind of goes back to my worry about some of these transfers not coming from winning programs. Is like, you need to make the pieces fit. And in order to make the pieces fit, you need players to buy into their roles, which oftentimes means taking less shots, having the ball in your hands less often. And for guys like Arthur Kaluma, Tremont Mark, they're here, so they understand what their role is going to be, at least a little bit. But I think that a big aspect of this season is going to be like, hey, Arthur, like, let's not take the pull-up threes when we're down 7 in the second half, or Tremont Mark playing a little bit harder defense in the first half, maybe making that extra pass down the court to Trey Johnson or in the corner to open Kendall Weaver, who hopefully shoots it this year. I just think that things like that are going to be very, very prevalent for this Texas team. But Rodney Terry has shown that he is better at finding their best lineup than Chris Beard was at Texas. So that's a hope that I have.
Absolutely agree. But You were right there with Tremont Mark and Arthur Kaluma. What do those two guys have in common?
They are absolutely chaotic basketball players.
Not what I was going for. Both of them last offseason left winning situations with winning basketball coaches at winning programs where they would have been featured key players to go to, yes, programs that were also winning programs, but there was no reason that at least I can think of why Tremont Mark would have had to leave Houston, why Arthur Kaluma would have had to leave Creighton. And both of the teams that they joined, I like Kansas State wasn't a sinking ship, but it had some holes in it. Arthur Kaluma was badly inconsistent. Same with Tremont Mark at Arkansas, which was not just a sinking ship, that was Titanic bad last year.
Still managed to beat Mizzou by 20.
That's
Twice.
2024 Mizzou is beyond sinking ship, though. Back to the point.
The 20 hold on really quick. 2024 Mizzou is like that submarine that they sent
I was gonna say the same
last summer and it exploded.
I was gonna say the same
Titanic Death Staff is one of the greatest memes ever. Anyway, Tremont Mark left Houston when he would have been a featured star on a top 5 team. Arthur Kaluma left Creighton when he would have been a featured star on a top 15 team. And neither of them were able to find a place that they thrived at and would welcome them back for another year.
Yeah.
So
I'm worried about
Arthur
Jonathan,
Kaluma,
I want to hear your thoughts on Kaluma. I know
Arthur,
that you have thoughts on Arthur Kaluma. I want to hear it.
Arthur
Sam,
Kaluma,
you want to finish what you said?
I liked, and this is the thing, last offseason, I was super high on both Kaluma and Mark. And then, now, I think so much less of them after last season, even though the counting stats are fine. The stats are fine. I just watched them play in a system that isn't a well-oiled machine geared towards winning by elite top 10 coaches in the country, top 10, top 15 coaches in the country. And I love Jerome Tang. I think he's a great coach. And Eric Musselman's also a great coach. But those were not winning situations last year. And how much of that is because of Kaluma, because of Mark? I don't know. We'll figure that out. But adding two of these guys just feels like that meme where it's the guy adding where it's the chef in the kitchen and he just gently lifts off the lid and he puts the thing in and it all explodes. I don't know. Okay, that's UCF. But Texas is not too far from that because I think Rodney Terry is significantly worse than both Musselman and Tang, who are both probably worse than McDermott, who's definitely much worse than Sampson.
Yeah, I just to add here, I think the problem with Kaluma that you're looking for, Sam, is it's not that Arthur Kaluma is not better than he was as a freshman because he did improve. He took leaps and bounds in efficiency and 3-point shooting. The problem is when we watched Arthur Kaluma at the end of his freshman season, we thought we were going to see a future All-American at some point in his career. And it's just never gotten to that point. He was fine his sophomore year at Creighton. He was fine last year at Kansas State on a team that wasn't very good. And now he gets another chance at Texas on a team that should be, in theory, much better. But the problem with Arthur Kaluma is he never has got to that ceiling that we once thought he had. And the other thing that I wanted to say is Tremont Mark, I can sort of give a pass for last year. Like, Houston's culture is different. I think everyone knows that. And Arkansas, with the way their season went, everyone just kind of checked out last year at the end of the season. And I think in a state that he's probably more familiar with, back where he was playing college ball originally, it is probably a much different situation for him. And I think we'll see closer to what he was at Houston than what he was at Arkansas.
I hope so. I hope so. And the other thing with him leaving the winning program at Houston, even Kaluma too, we don't fully know
Yes,
the situation
obviously.
of the players. They can leave and they can be forced out. But the thing with Tremont Mark is like, I thought that what he was last season was a pretty far cry from what he was at Houston. And so I'm hoping that he's able to tap into that sophomore year, that freshman year, University of Houston form. As for Kaluma, I hope he proves me wrong this year. This was an addition that I'm not high on. They needed to add some size, but adding size in the form of someone who, like, he doesn't defend well. From what I've watched of Arthur Kaluma, I watched him in person 3 times last season. Once in Austin and twice at the Big 12 tournament. And he does not play hard. And that's something in Rodney Terry's system, when you're trying to build a culture, especially as a veteran player on a team, you have to play hard. You have to be running up and down the court, making hustle plays. And I think that, Arthur Kaluma is somebody who is either going to really flourish at Texas. He's going to be he could be a high efficiency scorer if he takes good shots. But at the same time, his floor is incredibly low. If he doesn't play hard, he doesn't defend well, there are players who will play over him. Like if Nick Cody's healthy, which there's no indication that he's healthy, but if Nick Cody's healthy, that's somebody who is around the same size of Arthur Kaluma. He's a freshman. Kaluma's a senior. But if Cody is going to defend the rim harder, he's going to run up and down the court a little bit harder, he's going to play harder, and he's going to affect winning a little bit more, Texas will probably end up playing him more in conference play. So Arthur Kaluma is somebody more than any other new addition who will need to change the way that they played last season to fit what Texas is trying to do. And if he is able to do that, I think he can have a pretty good year. I'm not betting on it, and so that's why I wasn't a huge fan of the addition, but it's still possible with, like Jonathan said, he has a very high ceiling as he showed his freshman year at Creighton.
I'm also going to add a little bit onto this. I don't want to do the whole, I think it's good you got Damon off of your books, but I was never a huge Dylan Mitchell fan over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a downgrade from Dylan Mitchell.
Jason Kent is also a way better version of him.
Yes, exactly. Dylan Mitchell, you want to talk about a guy who didn't live up to the ceiling. Dylan Mitchell, would have a half of basketball where he looks like Kevin Durant and a half of basketball where he looks like Jason Conander.
First off, all my friends would agree with that. So crazy that you were able to infer that I can't shoot. I can pass, but I definitely can't defend. The Dylan Mitchell experiment failed. It wasn't as bad as Greg Brown, my freshman year.
No, not even close.
Oh, God.
Like that's as bad as it can get for a 5-star who actually plays, in my opinion.
Okay, but, yeah, I was about to put something in the private chat.
Yeah, like Greg Brown was terrible. Like that was and that's honestly being nice about it. Dylan Mitchell, at least on some nights, he would affect winning on both ends of the court. He played really hard too, which was something that I loved about him. And he could get you a double-double on some nights. He just wasn't consistent, and he never, ever, ever shot the ball outside of the paint, ever. And, I mean, he did in high school, and he did, randomly. That video of him shooting three-pointers at the NBA Draft Combine last May needs to be studied in a lab.
Oh, it was absolutely doctored.
What? He hits all those three-pointers, and, I mean, his form looked a little ugly, but it worked. And I remember asking him as soon as we got to talk to him when they were back on campus, asking him, are you going to shoot the ball more this year? And he kind of looked at me we'll see. And then he, didn't at all. He would take a couple of deep jump shots, and they didn't look good at all. What's up?
Hey, he took 8. It's more than 0. He took 8 more than he did in his freshman year.
I don't know.
Dylan Mitchell, I watched in person as Dylan Mitchell played his best game of college basketball of his career against UConn.
Yeah.
I left impressed, but I also left feeling is this really the best that Dylan Mitchell can do? And I'm kind of I'm glad they're not relying on him to take a step forward the way they were last year, because I just don't. I'm not sure it's going to happen. Jonathan, you remember who I compared him to in high school?
Jalen Wilson, right?
A springier Jalen Wilson. But this was like before Jalen Wilson took the step. So it was like the Jalen Wilson that only scored on straight line. Oh wait, that was also Jalen Wilson his senior. but the Jalen Wilson that only scored off of like offensive rebound, like 1 or 2 straight line drives a game, or would like catch a lob and play some solid defense. And like I don't see any reason to believe right now that Dillon Mitchell takes the Jalen Wilson leap.
And if he does, it'll be in a different conference now, which I know Texas lost. So they'll.
I don't think he'll get the opportunity to do so at Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati has too many other guys.
I agree.
Anyway, we haven't mentioned Jason Kent more than like 10 seconds. Jonathan, go. Talk about Jason Kent.
So Jason Kent was a guy last year, and Sam, you know this. I said that he might have been Indiana State's most important player just because of what he did for them. He was easily their most athletic guy. He was their best rebounder. And the thing is, at Texas, I don't know if he's going to need to do the things he did at Indiana State. He can just kind of do what he does and be fine. And granted, like the things that he did for Indiana State were the things he did super well. But like last year, he took a substantial leap in scoring, in three-point shooting, in just volume of shots. Jason Kent is a guy that you can throw on the floor and he will go in and make two or three really nice plays, defend and rebound. Like he is a super efficient player that shot 64% from the field last year, that he will also probably end up being Texas's second best rebounder, if not best rebounder, next to Caden Shedrick. So like I really like the get for Texas. I'm not sure how much he's going to play here, how much they like, if they like Kaluma, if Kaluma's playing well, and then also with Cody at the same position. But Jason Kent's going to find his way onto the floor just because of how hard he plays sometimes.
He's too good to not be on the floor at all, really. And unfortunately for Brian Wardle, he learned that the hard way.
Jason Kent is an addition that I'm really excited about because he does all the little things. He's an incredibly efficient player. He rebounds hard. He shoots the ball incredibly well. He added a 3-point shot that was present at times last season. And so I think that there's a lot that Texas can do with him in this offense. Yeah, the biggest question is how much is he going to play? But I think that his consistencies mixed with Arthur Kaluma's inconsistencies will probably give you the answer on who will be on the court in the last few minutes of the game if the season goes the way that I think it'll go. So I like what Jason Kent brings. Again, he's a veteran addition. It kind of feels pointless saying that when they have 6 seniors on this team, 5 of which were originally brought in as transfers, 4 of which are transfers on this season's team. But Jason Kent, like I said, he rebounds. This Texas team got out-rebounded almost every single night last season. Size was an issue. Rebounding was a bigger issue. Jason Kent will help in both of those areas. Size is a little more questionable for me. Like he's listed as 6'8", which means that he's probably more like 6'6", 6'7", but he's a guy who plays bigger. So we'll see. He rebounds well though. And so that's something that excites me. Texas really needed that. And so between the size of Kaluma and the rebounding ability of Kent, theoretically, they should rebound the basketball a lot better.
On to Caden Shedrick, who I was very high on last year. And, I mean, he was Caden Shedrick. I should have known that he wasn't going to get any better.
He didn't get worse.
No, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad player. He's a solid player to have. He's a fine center. But that's what he is. He's a fine center. And I mean, like Zarek Onyema played 15% of the minutes last year at Texas. It felt like he played 40% of the minutes watching those games, though.
They played Dessou at the 5 too. So
maybe because the game that I went to, he played 28 minutes. So regardless, Dessou. Once Dessou got back, it changed the complexion of that team. And I'm going to be honest with you. Texas was not good at basketball last year until Dylan Dessou came back. And I remember saying after coming out of New York that I didn't think they were good. They got blown out by Marquette. They lost their only 2 up games. They needed a buzzer beater to beat freaking Louisville. And like they squeezed by. Okay, maybe not squeezed by, but they didn't really like they almost blew a lead to LSU, or maybe not almost blew it, but they were commanding that game. Then they weren't. It never got particularly close, but it never got. It was out of hand, and then it wasn't. And LSU wasn't very good, and LSU was dealing with a whole situation in that game as well. And they couldn't really pull away from Corpus. They didn't really pull away from Arlington until very late. Arlington ended up being very good, though.
They trailed Delaware State in the second half at the U12 last year.
Yes, I remember this. I
They did.
I remember this. I think I remember you texting me about this, Jonathan, or me texting you.
I probably was slandering somebody.
I think I know who that somebody is. But yeah, Texas also had that weird thing where they couldn't win at home and they couldn't lose on the road. That was just variance. But what would you say are the expectations for this Texas team this year? What would a Texas fan be happy with? And what do you think is a realistic expectation and ranking region for this program this year?
Well, the expectation, Texas fans should always be happy with the Sweet 16. And I think that's the expectation this year with the high-level transfers who they've brought in, especially some of the vets. You know, this isn't like a 2021 situation where they brought in a bunch of transfers who had a couple of years of eligibility left, and they kind of laid the foundation for what ended up being an Elite Eight run, albeit their coach wasn't there anymore. But this isn't that situation. You know, they have a roster that is built, that is structured to try and win this year, especially because it's Trey Johnson's only year at Texas. I think a ranking area for Texas, top 20, maybe with the weak non-conference, if some of those games go their way, UConn, I think they're going to lose to at home. That's not a hot take, but obviously some more moving parts at UConn this season, so we don't fully know how they're going to look. I still think they're going to lose that game. Ohio State, I think that they'll probably win to open up the season, and hopefully, it's just tough with football and how good the football team at Texas is supposed to be this year, but hopefully a season-opening win in Las Vegas against Ohio State, build some excitement around the program with the players, and it kind of lays the groundwork for what can be a really exciting year. I think that ranking will be around the top 20 if they win some of those non-conference games against NC State, somehow UConn, Ohio State. They'll be ranked pretty high going into conference play because they just won't have very many, if any, losses. Like you said, they have the MTE where they play Syracuse and St. Joe's and Texas Tech, but that was the Texas Tech team that they handled last season, and a Syracuse team that I think will be better than last year, but a St. Joe's team that doesn't have Eric Reynolds anymore. And so,
yes, they do.
They do.
Yes.
Oh, who was I thinking of then that transferred to Minnesota, the guard?
Patterson from Charlotte?
Okay. I thought that Eric Reynolds hit the portal.
No, he was like there. It was heavily rumored. He never hit the portal.
Yeah, teams tried for sure.
Okay, I totally thought that he transferred to Minnesota with Patterson. I knew Patterson was at Minnesota. I thought that he was at Minnesota. Interesting. Okay, well, good to know that he's not.
St. Joe's has Xavier Brown, Reynolds, Derek Simpson, Rasheer Fleming, and the Harvard transfer Justice Ajibor. It's a really talented lineup.
I hope they play them, and I hope they don't lose because it'll scare them away from ever playing a mid-major of that quality again. But, even though it's sort of an unintentional matchup with them playing in an MTE, it's not like they're going on the road and playing St. Joe's. But hopefully, that's the type of game and the type of win where they can look at that and be like, that actually did increase our net ranking, and we actually did learn a little bit about our team in this game. And,
I don't know
that actually
keeps insisting on going to New York City.
What's up?
I don't know why Texas keeps insisting on going to New York City. This is
I know. This is going to be their third straight winner doing it. They went to New York City and played Illinois and lost. And then they went to.
I forgot about that game because I wasn't there. But yeah, I was at the Empire Classic last year.
Yikes.
The
Louisville one was rough.
Yeah, the entire crowd left after UConn, Indiana. Like, it was maybe 5,000 people at the Texas Louisville game.
Yeah, Texas doesn't have basketball fans, and when they do, they only appear after football season is long over.
And when they do, they only appear in Texas.
Yeah, and they don't travel well. Like, that's the thing with that Vegas game. It's going to be empty, probably. But if there are going to be fans there,
I think most Vegas games are empty.
Yeah, that's why I said that.
Unless it's like Arizona or
Duke,
not even USC.
Duke, Kansas will have fans there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's Duke, Kansas. Duke, Kansas could play on the moon and there'd be fans there. But probably like Arizona would be like it's a solid draw in Vegas, but like even then when they played FAU in Vegas, it wasn't a gigantic crowd. I just don't think Vegas like gets huge crowds. I don't think any like neutral site really gets that big of crowds in the early going of college basketball season. There's a reason why the most prestigious MTEs, Maui, Atlantis, they're not in these gigantic arenas. The only venues that really get like big crowds in November and December, the Garden will get a big crowd for Jimmy V. And then like if Purdue plays a game in Indianapolis or Indiana plays a game in Indianapolis, that'll get a crowd. If those are the types of games that get crowds, not Texas playing Ohio State in Vegas.
We'll see about the Players Fest though. Like if they're able to incorporate, a fun experience for the fans, like that would be a really fun travel trip. Go to Vegas, 11 other high level programs there.
I'm sure it would be fun. I don't know how many other people think that though.
Yeah, Vegas is expensive, man. Too. I think that's the thing. Like I've said multiple times on this episode. Texas is a football school. The basketball program could have the roster of Alabama this year, and you probably wouldn't care as much about it as you do with Alabama because people just aren't talking about it. There's not the energy about it. There's not that's the frustrating thing about Texas. And so I hope that this year they have an exciting team, a team that galvanizes the campus community and the alumni where they look at it and they're like, this is fun. This is exciting. I want to pay more for this. And it lays the groundwork for a couple more years of this fun. But, high ceiling, low floor for this Texas team. I like some of the additions. I have questions about others. Sam, you and I disagree on Trey Johnson. Partially, I'm not as high on him as Texas is. I don't at all want to be associated with that. I do think that he will have a good year. I think that he's very talented. And I think that his skill set. I was
wrong on Brandon Miller, so.
I think that his skill set is something that they haven't had from a freshman, at least in my time following Texas.
I think that, look, I haven't watched a significant. I obviously other guys have watched a lot more film on him than I have, but the film that I watched on Trey Johnson, he didn't have as much juice as I thought he did off the dribble. His shot was meh. His creation, he was taking just a lot of mid ranges that I didn't think were great. And look, he's a shot creator. He is a scorer, and I just didn't think he was very good at scoring. He could be. He could be. Maybe the games that I watched were just all of his worst games.
Maybe. I'm excited for this season, though. I love the fact that you guys do these previews in August because even though football's about to start, I love college basketball. I love it more than college football, more than any other sport, and it's never too early to talk some college hoops. And so it'll be an exciting year for Texas. I'm really happy that they hit the portal hard this offseason. I thought that last offseason they were a little top-heavy with adding Asmus and Shedrick. Weaver ended up being a good addition, but we talked about Zarek Onyema. He was out of the rotation by conference play for the most part, and unless he adds a little bit more physicality, He's just not really going to play
He
at all.
grows 3 inches.
Maybe they'll grows 3 inches exactly. Maybe they'll throw him in to get a couple of rebounds, but other than that, he really limits the offense, especially with some of the players who they have this season, Kluma and Kent and Shetrick.
Yeah, I'm not as high on Texas as you are, and I think you probably could get that from listening to the 46 minutes that we've done so far. I do not have them in the 20s in my rankings. They're lower than that for me. I will not reveal where I have them because that is A, subject to change. B, will be revealed on the top 100 countdown. They are in my top 100.
Exactly. Well, I hope so. I was going to say we haven't gotten to that point of the Sam Fetterman.
We're not the biggest Rodney Terry fans on this podcast, but we have a little bit of we do have shame. We do have self-respect.
I'm not the biggest Rodney Terry fan either. As a coach, I just want to say full disclosure, I absolutely love RT as a person.
Oh, I'm sure he's a
fantastic person. He's such a great guy. Very gracious with his time and with the attention that he gives to people. Like, he cares. And that's something that's very apparent about him, both as a basketball coach and as a person. I just think with the hiring power of the University of Texas, there could be a better man to run this program a year from now.
Exactly. This is exactly what I said last year, and I stand by it to this day.
If they let go of RT, John Calipari could be their coach right now. If they let go of him after the tournament run, if they lose that game to Penn State, John Calipari might have ended up being their coach.
Well, that might be the only way to get Texas boosters excited about basketball.
Or Scott Drew or Kelvin Sampson, but they'll never agree with the whole Sampson thing of making his son the next head coach. They'll never go for that.
They would never go to Texas either, those two.
I think Scott Drew, people said the same thing about Chris Beard. Now, Chris Beard was an alum. Scott Drew is not. Scott Drew obviously hasn't left Baylor yet. To my understanding,
I also don't think Texas Tech is like comparable to Baylor and Houston.
It's not, but you have to understand that at the time, Scott Drew had just won a national championship, but Kelvin Sampson had just made a Final Four. Chris Beard had just made a national championship to a tournament ago at that time because the 2020 tournament had been canceled. So Chris Beard was regarded, and that Texas Tech program were regarded a lot higher in 2020, maybe than they are regarded in 2024. Or 2021, make that. But the hiring power is strong at Texas. Scott Drew would pick up the phone, as he did for Louisville, as he did for Kentucky. He'd at least pick up the phone for Texas. I don't think that he'd sign pen to paper, but those would be their first two who they would have real interest in, would be Scott Drew and Kelvin Sampson. And people said Schloss would never leave for Texas. People said Chris Beard would never leave for Texas. The hiring power of the school cannot be underestimated. And I'm not just saying that as an alum, as a partial fan at times. The hiring power of the school is very strong, especially when it comes to other universities in state. That's usually where they look. They usually target that. The other schools know that. I would be very interested to see what direction Texas would go. Steve Forbes is a name that was brought up a lot when Rodney Terry was still coaching on the interim tag. That doesn't obviously excite me or anyone as much as Scott Drew, Kelvin Sampson, but it'll be interesting to see where they look if this year doesn't go the way that it could.
You said they liked hiring in state. What about new Texas head coach Billy Gillispie?
Be like Billy Gillispie. That would be absolutely hilarious.
We got to end the show on that note. Jonathan?
All right. If you came to hear about Tyler Self and where he's working, you came to the right place. If you came to hear about Jason Conander taking Dylan Mitchell's role in the Texas starting lineup, you came to the right place. And if you came to hear about Caleb Grill and what he's up to, you came to the right place. This is Season 5, Episode 11, our Texas preview on Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. We'll see you next time.
We'll be back later today. Rutgers and Butler coming up.
Yes.